So here's a definition that's really hard to find in the NEC, and that is in sight from. And the reason it's hard to find is we don't really use the term in sight from. We usually use the term within sight or within sight from. So it's easy to get lost and not know how to find this definition. So what does in sight from or within sight mean? Well, that's equipment that is visible and not farther than 50 feet from a specific location or piece of equipment. All right, so usually when we talk about in sight from, and I can't think of any exceptions to this, the only time we talk about in sight from is when we're talking about a disconnecting means for a particular piece of equipment. So a lot of things require a disconnecting means, and the one that I first learned this on back when I was an apprentice was an air conditioner, and I still think it was a great example by the guy that explained this to me. He said, look, if you have, we were outside and we were wiring air conditioners, right? We were installing the disconnecting means, the liquid type coming down from them, and I wasn't quite sure what this piece of equipment we were hanging on the wall was. And he said, well, this is a disconnecting means, and the reason that we have that is because if there's an air conditioning guy that's out there working on the equipment, what if he's got his arms, halfway down inside this unit? We don't want somebody inside saying, geez, it's hot in here, and cranks up the thermostat, fires up the motor and the fans, and cuts the guy's arms off. And to this day, I think that's probably about as good of an example as you could possibly get. So why is it important that we have that disconnecting means out there by the unit? Well, so that way the person that's working on it can shut it off, obviously, and hopefully lock it out, verify the absence of voltage, do all of the things that are part of establishing an electrically safe work condition. That's kind of the subject for NFPA 70E. So in the NEC, we just want to make sure that we can shut the piece of equipment off. And that disconnect for air conditioning equipment, the rule for it is in 440.14, and it says it has to be within sight of the equipment. So what does that mean? It means it has to be visible from the equipment. So the air conditioner disconnect has to be visible from the air conditioner itself. So you can see it. Can't be around a corner. I don't care if it's 5 feet away. If it's around a corner, that does not comply. It has to be visible from the equipment. Additionally, it has to be within 50 feet of the equipment. Depending on where you are visible, you might be able to see, several hundred yards. But if somebody was going to walk over there and turn on the switch for the equipment that you're working on, well, that's not going to work either. So we need it to be within sight and within 50 feet. Within 50 feet means I can yell at the person before they shut it off or before they turn it on, or worst case scenario, I can throw my pliers at them semi-accurately at 50 feet. In the real world, I would tell you if you are relying on a disconnecting means, you need to put a lock on that thing. Establish a proper lockout tagout policy. So this is the definition of within sight. In the example, we obviously have a very large motor, and its disconnecting means is within sight, as you can see. So that would be an example of within sight. Different requirements for different pieces of equipment. 440.14 is pretty stringent. It says, look, the disconnect has to be within sight. You go to 430.102A and B for motors like the ones we're looking at, the rules are a little bit different. Sometimes it's required to be within sight, sometimes it's not required to be within sight. Sometimes there are disconnecting means, like in Part 2 of Article 225, which might apply to like a detached garage, a building supplied by a branch circuit or a feeder circuit. You'll have rules for those that don't even have a within sight provision. It pretty much just says, listen, that disconnecting means has to be in or on the building. So I don't want you to think that the rules for disconnecting means are all the same regardless of the equipment. They're not. Sometimes they have to be within sight. Sometimes, if they're not within sight, they have to be lockable. Other times, it doesn't even talk about within sight. So there you go. Visible, not farther than 50 feet from the piece of equipment or location that we're discussing. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and ring the bell.